Good morning, Year 3. Welcome to another week of Maths at Home with Mrs. Whitley. I hope you had a lovely weekend and you're ready to start your maths. Good morning, Year 3. In this session, we're going to be looking at representing numbers using base 10, which is the pictures that you can see on the screen in front of you. You can see 100 square, a 10 and a 1. Now, if you were to think about the place value of this number, you would need to think about how many hundreds are there, how many tens are there, and how many ones are there. So this number would show 100, 1 in the tens column, 1 in the ones column. It is 111. Look at this slide. What does this number show? Think carefully about how many hundreds there are, how many tens there are, and how many ones there are, and then write this number down in your book. Look at this slide in front of you. What do you notice that is different? Have a think about that for a moment. That's right, there is now a 1,000 column, so you've now got thousands, hundreds, tens and ones. I want you to think carefully about how many thousands there are, how many hundreds there are, how many tens there are, and how many ones there are. Think about how you would write this number and write that into your book too. Well done! So in your book you will have written 1,224. There's 1,000 in the 1,000 column, there's 200s in the 100 column, there's 2 tens in the tens column, and there's 4 ones in the ones column. On the next slide you will see that there are a list of numbers. What you need to do, depending on your group, is to be able to look at the numbers and draw pictures to show what they would look like using the base 10 idea. Hot group, you will move on to the next slide and there will be some questions involving problem solving on the screen. Enjoy. This week in maths, we're going to be looking a little bit at adding using our mental strategies. This means using our brain rather than jotting things down on a piece of paper in order to work a calculation out formally. So what we're going to look at today is we're going to be looking at estimation by using our rounding skills. Now on the board you'll see that I've written the sum 33 add 24. So what we're going to do is we're going to first of all round these two numbers to the nearest 10 using the skills from last week, and then we are going to estimate what the answer is. So let's start with the first one. We've got 33. Now remember, when we're rounding to 10 we have to look at the 1, and the 1 on here is a 3, okay, because we've partitioned the 33 into tens and ones, so we've got a 3. Now remember the rule, if we're rounding to the nearest 10 and the 1 is under 5, we round it down and it becomes 30, okay? Then we go to the other number that we have in our number sentence, which is 24. Again, we look at it, we partition it, we look at the ones, here is the ones, and we see that the ones is under 5 again. So we're going to round it down to the nearest 10, which is 20. So we've now got 30 add 20, which is 50. Okay, that's estimating the answer. It's not giving the answer exactly, but it's estimating the answer. And that's the process that needs to happen in your head. In the last slide, we looked at estimating through rounding, and I've got two more examples for you. So the first one is 42, add 37, and we've got 54, add 38. Now remember, when we're estimating, we're finding a rough answer. So we're not looking for the exact calculation, we're looking for a rough answer. It's an estimate. And we're using our rounding skills in order to do this. So let's start with the first one. The first thing, remember, you need to look for is look at the 1. Is the 1 over 5 or under 5? And then you need to round it to the nearest 10, whether it's 40 or 50. Then you need to look at this one and do the same thing. You need to think, is the 1 over 5 or under 5? And then you need to round it to the nearest 10, which would be 30 or 40. Once you've found those two numbers, you then can add them together and that will give you your estimate. Okay, so have a go at that in your book and then do the same with the next one and then we'll look at the answers. So pause the video, work it out in your book and then we'll look at the answers. Okay, so now you should have had a chance to have written those sums into your book. We are now going to go through these together. Remember, this is a strategy that you are eventually going to do in a minute, all in your head, but we're jotting it down just to remind ourselves of what the method is that we need to be doing in our head. Okay, so the first one, we've got 42. We know that the 1 is under 5, so we're going to round it down to 40. So we will have the number 40. Then we are going to round this one, and we've got a 7 in the ones. Okay, that means we need to round it up. So this will also be 40. So your estimate would be 80. That's a rough amount for the answer to the sum. If you look at the next one, you've got 54 add 38. So again, we look at the 1. We see that that's under 5. So we're going to round it to 50. And then we have 38. The 8 in the ones column is over 5. So we're going to round it up. So we will have 50 add 40, which equals 90. Now on the next slide, I'm going to put some questions, depending on your group, for mild, spicy and hot. And I want you to use this method to quickly calculate, as an estimate, what the answers are. Year 3, welcome to Maths at Home with Mrs. Whitley, our Wednesday session. Now, as you can tell from the board, we're going to be looking at adding a 3-digit number to a 1-digit number. But remember, we've been looking this week at mental strategies. That means using your brain to work out the number sentence rather than writing it out on a piece of paper and formally working it out. So what we're going to do is we're going to be looking at using our number bonds to help us to work out this calculation. Now, when we talk about number bonds, we think about pairs of numbers that total a number. So, for example, in this calculation, we've got 5, and we can think about what numbers make 5. So, for example, 4 add 1 makes 5, 3 add 2 makes 5, 5 add 0 makes 5. And we think about the calculation 106 add 5. Now, how can those number bonds help us to work out this sum? Now, what we do is we use the 5 and we break it down into 4 add 1. Because we know in our calculation we've got 106 and we're going to use the 4 from the 5 to add to the 6, which will give us 110. 6 and 4 makes 10. So we know if we do 106 plus the 4 from the 5 will give us 110, and then we can add the 1 and that will give us 111. So what we're using is our number bonds in our minds to work out the answer. On this slide, I would like you to look at your group colour and see how quickly you can work them through using the method that I taught you on the last slide. Now remember, if we look at the mild first question, it says 26 add 5. If we break the 5 down into 4 add 1, we know it's 4 add 1 we're going to use because we know that 26 has got a 6 and 6 add 4 makes your 10. So 26, add the 4 from the 5 is 30, and then you add your 1, which is 31. How did you get on with the last slide? Hopefully you're beginning to get the hang of adding 5. Now we're going to look at one more example. In this example on the whiteboard you can see 108 add 7 equals 115. Okay, I'm going to show you again how to use a mental strategy to be able to find the answer. Now the one that we're adding is 7. We want to think about what pairs of numbers make 7. Okay, so we know that 2 and 5 make 7. We know that 4 and 3 make 7. We know that 6 and 1 make 7. And we're going to use one of those number bonds to help us to work out 108 add 7. So what we do is we think about 108, we think about what do I need to add to the 8 to get us to the next 10 that I can use from the 7. So we take the 2, which gives us 110. We then add the 5 from the 7, which brings us to 115.